I'm reading today from my book, How to Be Human, a guide for the age of machines and fire. And it's a look at really honestly what does it mean to be a temporary creature floating around on a rock, and looking at thousands of years of potential answers to that, and very specifically from Plato, this idea of divine madness and this balance of the rational, like we see from Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, pitted against a more Platonic wildness, the irrationality of pure, unadulterated creativity, and finding the balance between those places in the human experience. This is the introduction, and the first section, Living in a Painting by Thomas Cole. Well, here we are again on Earth. Lovely place sometimes. We've got zebras, rainbows, minty chocolate chip ice cream, 20,000 flavors of love, and even giraffes. We used to have big old dinosaurs, too. Did you know there are teams of scientists right now studying the singing behavior of giraffes? Apparently, the giraffes hum to each other at night, which seems to bring them comfort. I like to remember this about the giraffes because sometimes it isn't so lovely on Earth. On our planet, we've got famine and plagues, infestations, cancerous growths, rot, bile, venom, and greed, to name just a few of our problems. Our time here can be quite dark when we are laying in bed staring at the midnight ceiling and thinking of our inevitable descent into the void of nothingness. To be human at times is to be downright miserable, broken, battered, and bruised, drowned, choking on the fumes of a civilization that seems destined to burn itself to the ground. Our ancestors scattered, our hopes and ambitions frustrated, our bones aching and tired. So very tired can we be. And it's not all our own fault either. When the filmmaker Werner Herzog went to Peru and ventured deep into the jungles of the Amazon, he commented, "Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder." I'm not known for my sunny disposition, but this strikes even me as being a bit morbid, a bit much. In this jungle, Herzog goes on, nature is vile and base. Sure, humans have made quite a bit of misery for ourselves as well, with our machines and industries and weapons and wars. But the basic package of life wasn't very good to begin with anyway. Eat or be eaten is the rule of the land, sea, and sky. And I wouldn't be very surprised if other planets happen to work this way too, but we don't know yet. Certainly the stars eventually run out of energy, and galaxies are moving away from each other, with a whole lot of nothingness betwixt them. It's a pretty grim outlook, but sometimes it seems the science is behind that grimness. So what are we to do with that hard slab of truth, or apparent truth? Everyone dies, and the species itself might not survive much longer, and even if it does, for how long? At some point, no more humans seems like a likely outcome. Given that you find yourself to be a mortal creature on a rock bound for doom, what should we do with our time while we're here? What have we got going for us? What does it really mean to be a human bound by the waves of time, floating through space in a temporary dream? I, for one, and for many, refuse to be so easily defeated by this low-hanging nihilism. From the Latin nihilo, nothingness, a philosophy of there's just nothingness. I happen to think there are some very good things worth doing in this world. I resolve to banish this darkness, and I resolve to carry the light. You may call me idealistic, but it need not be driven by ideals. We may be driven by passion, by madness, by love, by courage. There's a lot to live for, but you've got to create it. There's the existentialist in me, maybe. Maybe I can help you find some of those things worth fighting for, or think through some problems, or at least provide some nourishment for your mind in this floating place between sunup and sundown. Personally, me, I'm driven by daydreams, by plans, by new directions and opportunities. I love snapping ideas together in my head, creating something new out of the raw material of life, and finding the spaces to create and make new ideas, new songs, new theories, new opportunities, new realities, new wood carvings for that matter. And that will be the focus of this book, this beautiful, often irrational desire to create. And I mean to talk to you about the cracks and the cracking, the wild, the creative, the mad, and the new, what emerges from the destruction. I love unfettered creative freedom, unexplored terrain, fresh pathways, the open seas, the open road. And I think we have to be a little bit crazy to lean into our differences and our strangenesses to make these new things happen, to create itself. After all, where do these dreams come from? To build flying machines and houses and start businesses and switch careers and play Bach on the viola with a quartet. It all comes from within us, from humans to humans. We must cultivate and build our dreams to build a better future for ourselves and for others, to dream of new realities. But these mad moments of creativity flit by like little wisps, sometimes never to be seen again. How does it work, and where do they come from? The late David Lynch, venerated offbeat filmmaker, described his creative process as being something like fishing. You might be sitting there and all of a sudden some mad flash of a silvery creature swims by, and you've got to grab it. You've got to grab it and run with it, if it's a very good fish. And there are always new fish to snatch from the ether. You might wake up one day and realize you hate your job and you're miserable. That's a little fish swimming by. That's the start of an idea. You got a bite. What will you do with it? What will you do with that idea? By the end of this book, I don't truly hope to once and for all answer the question, what does it mean to be a human? That's a task that for thousands of years philosophers have tried to contend with. But I will make an argument that to be human is to be miserable, to suffer, to hurt, of course. But it is also to dream, to create, to build, and to question. I want to break that open and see what it looks like. We'll hold it in our palms and look at it for a while. Why not? We owe it to ourselves to consider what we are and what we're doing. Those are some of the oldest questions of philosophy. Who are we, and what is a good life that's worth living, and how should society be structured, and what's it all mean, Johnny? Entire civilizations have come and gone before us who also asked these questions, whose people asked these questions, from the Sumerians to the Romans and countless others. And our little slice of the pie will be consumed as well one day. But for now, we shall zoom inward and see what is inside of us, and whether we can make something out of that rawness and that pain and that misery. And I know we can, for I have, and you have. We've been doing it for a good long while already, and we've got a ways to go still. I love the scene from Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy where the hobbits are at their favorite little local pub, the Green Dragon. There's singing and dancing and plenty of beer going around. But there's a dark undertone that surrounds the moment. Strange things have been happening in the idyllic Shire. Gaffer Gamgee says, "War is brewing. The mountains are fair teeming with goblins. And Sandyman says, "Far off tales and children's stories, that's all that is. You're beginning to sound like that old Bilbo Baggins. Cracked he was." And Gaffer Gamgee says, "Young Mr. Frodo here, he's cracking." And Frodo says, "And proud of it. Cheers, Gaffer." Here, cracked and cracking means something like going a bit mad. Bilbo Baggins was thought to be a bit of an eccentric, a little tookish. Yet from this perspective, it is certainly Bilbo and Frodo who have much more knowledge of the going-ons of the wider world. Madness in this way can be a great gift of vision. There really were goblins teeming in the hills, and there were strange things happening in that world. It allows us to see the world for how it truly is: strange, bizarre, twisted, sometimes painful, and much bigger than ourselves. After all, the mountains really were fair teeming with goblins in Middle-earth. Here's how things will go. In chapters 1 and 2, I break open this idea of madness from Plato, that ancient Greek philosopher who told us through Socrates that madness was a gift from the gods, a kind of divine creative madness that can inspire us. Indeed, the etymology or origin of the word inspire seems to mean something like to be breathed through by the gods, an ancient way of describing how ideas seem to just naturally rise up to us as if they were gifts or little fish swimming by. If you tend toward atheism or agnosticism, bear with me as I write about gods and the divine. I tend to use these words with much more a mythological or semi-literary function than a literal theological intention. And I'm working on another book about metaphysics for materialists. I'm quite excited about, but it's a ways off still to flesh it out entirely. In chapter 3, we look at the allegory of the chariot, which also comes from Plato, as a way of thinking about our best and worst selves, that famous allegory of the chariot from Plato, where a good horse and a bad horse is pulling the soul, pulling the chariot through the heavens. The human seems dualistic in this way, where we can strive for greatness, but we're always burdened by horrors. By chapter 4, we start talking about Chomsky's linguistics and his argument that the highest human achievement and human nature itself seems rooted in this kind of generativity of language, of creativity, of art. In chapter 5, I look at our relationship with machines and technology and think about how we are positioned in relation to other forces and systems in the world. Do we dare outsource our creativity to machines, the very thing that makes us human? Are we even human anymore, or is it something passing us by? Is it a changing idea of what it means to be human? There's a brief foray of playing with artificial intelligence, wondering about the future, and chapter 7 concludes the book with some parting thoughts, some things to take on the road on your own adventure as a human. What I hope you take away from the book is not something so dark and grim as the end of the world, or that everything is on fire, or that we're all doomed. It's something absolutely to the contrary. In my many years of work and reading so much of our canonical literature and philosophy, from Homer to Shakespeare to Dante to Wordsworth, from Baudrillard to Baudelaire, from the ancients to the moderns, from working strange jobs and traveling all over our country, suffering through discectomies and sleep disorders and panic attacks and whirlwinds of fire, I'm here to tell you, it's actually all going to be totally fine, and you're totally fine just as you are. That's right. You're a human. And that means you got to buckle up and get cozy. And guess what? You must be human. More human than machine, anyway. And chances are, if you're reading this or listening to me, you already are a human. Thus, you are whole, complete, and perfectly fine just the way you are. In fact, it's the way you were meant to be, a bit tarnished, possibly half broken, perhaps more than a little confused at times, but still here. So keep going. I know it can feel like the world is ending. Maybe that's how you found this book. Maybe that's why you tuned in. But rest assured, the world is not ending. And even if it did begin to end, you could still fiddle or dance until it does. I've long admired a series of paintings by Thomas Cole called The Course of Empire. In the series, he depicts various stages of the birth, growth, collapse, and rebirth of civilizations. It's a very zoomed out perspective for a painter. It's a subject that covers perhaps thousands of years. I was surprised when a fellow professor I know said something like, I feel like we're living through that Thomas Cole painting, the one where everything is on fire and people are screaming and running around. Presumably this was in response to a certain new administration taking over power in the United States, as administrations do. And I had to blurt out, but we're always living in a Thomas Cole painting. What do you mean, they said, eyes scrunched up. And it seemed to me like they were missing the point of the whole series. We're always somewhere within the birth, rise, growth, decline, or fall of a civilization. You can't stop the machinery of 100 million people all milling about and doing weird, unpredictable things like they do. We're always somewhere in a stage of a Thomas Cole painting. In fact, this era that we now live in is probably no more important than any other era of human history. Sure, it has its idiosyncrasies and particularities like all times and all species. So do the worms in my garden have idiosyncrasies and particularities. Some of them are very big and good for fishing. We've always been in a painting by Thomas Cole, and we always will be. Better that we get used to it and figure out how we're going to have a little fun while we're here and carry some light and goodness forward with us. Maybe that's a touch ideological or idealistic of me, but what do I mind of the judgment of others? We need something to go by, something to get started. Give me an axiom and I shall smash it in half and swing it round for the world to see. So come cozy up or grab thy hammer and see what we might find when we crack down upon the cairn of stones. And if that isn't just a little bit of a touch of hubris for you, then I don't know what is. But the self-aggrandizement aside, I hope you enjoyed the introduction to my book, How to Be Human. You can get this book for free. I have it for free on my website, danlawrenceauthor.com. You can also get it for free if you sign up for our newsletter on that site. And I have a weekly, call it the Last Bastion newsletter, going out with just a little bit of light. Poetry, stories, ancient philosophy, interesting things about the prophets and seers of the past, and little tidbits of kind of interesting perennial ideas. I'm really interested in the timeless right now, especially in dark times. I tend to think of the timeless and what makes us human across time and universally. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hear the dogs barking, so I'll wrap things up. And again, this is from my book, How to Be Human, a guide for the age of machines and fire. And I hope you like it. Take care of yourselves.